Hello everyone and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host, Dungeon Master Vibe, and welcome to our first ever RPG's horror story video. I will be going into a little more on what my hopes and plans are for this at the end of the video, but for now I think I would like to start off with our very first story. This one actually comes from a good friend and in the past, both DM and player in my own games, Chloe. So, with that out of the way, let's get on into the story. The characters on this lovely story: me, the DM, Bob, a druid, Muscles, a half-orc barbarian, the supporting character of this story, Sir Meow, a tabaxi monk, Karamari, who, honestly, I never understood what they were besides being some sort of charisma spellcaster, and Chunibayo, a genie warlock, the protagonist of this story. Start by mentioning that this was a one-shot I ran some years ago, so I might not remember everything that happened. With that out of the way, the party woke up in the Feywild, with no memory of the past few days. So, they didn't know how they got there in the first place, where they were, or why they were there. Seems like a good start to your general Feywild shenanigans, and a good start to a one-shot, I might add. One-shots can be a bit difficult to bring the party together, to make it easy to simply start the adventure without having to worry too much about a lot of introductions. By situations like this, where you kind of just drop the party right into the action, or even not necessarily action, but at the very least the act of the adventure, they're able to immediately take some precedence and some personal stakes in figuring out their surroundings. In any case, let us continue the story. They decide to work together until they escape the forest, and so they begin walking around trying to find a way out or any clues to shine some light to their predicament. During their adventure, they found some bizarre creatures which they weren't familiar with roaming around, but most of them were indifferent to the party. Fast forward some exploration, the party found their first humanoids since they set foot in this place, other than themselves. They met an elf who was frightened by something or someone. She wasn't making much sense, but it was clear that she was trying to run away. The party decided to comfort her and try to get any information that they could help them leave this place, or at the very least, help her out. Eventually, the elf calmed down and told the party that the temple where she was from might have maps in the library. In exchange, she asked the party to help bring her siblings back to their senses, as they were currently hypnotized by something and were trying to attack her without explanation. See, so far so good in this story. Like I said, with the one-shots, it'd be hard to kind of bring the characters together to have kind of all the same kind of track mind on this. In this situation, they had the mutual situation of being trapped, lost, and confused, and likewise with this NPC, they find someone lost and confused and is able to present them a mutual goal. They need help, and they have a map to help them get out. So far good, very good structure, I'd say, for the one-shot itself. That does a good job of bringing a sort of precedence to the characters, even though this is their first time interacting together, and maybe like otherwise wouldn't actually work together. So, continuing on with the story though. Everything about this adventure sounds normal so far, but everything began to go downhill when the party got to the bridge leading up to the temple. After getting past the middle of the bridge, I described to them how two silhouettes that resembled those of a humanoid slowly began to cross the bridge. Most of the party decided to sprint to the end of the bridge and try to close the gates on the two lurking figures. This came to the conclusion that those two might be the siblings of the elf, and therefore they should avoid hurting them until they know what to do. But Junibayo suggested that someone should burn down the bridge. I neglected to mention that the bridge was set at the top of a mountain. Beneath it lay what seemed to be an endless pit. In other words, it was given that the siblings wouldn't survive the fall. After discussing how to carry it, the party convinced Junibayo to rush to the gates with them. Now, so far, I still am pretty on board with what they've got going on. Yes, there was a slight disagreement there, but what I like about this encounter is it makes excellent use of environment. In a lot of combat, even combat I've ran in the past, there is an issue of environment not playing enough of a role, which can make combat seem a bit dull, or even if not combat, just other encounters seem a bit dull because it is essentially almost perceived as just a flat plane. In this situation, you've got gates to interact with, you've got the bridge with the pit, and you have an interactable environment piece such as the gate to actually prevent the enemy from proceeding. So just quick little props to that structure of the encounter. I like that a lot. Back to the story. Until this point, it was the first half of the session, or the preface. The actual adventure was the temple, where they were supposed to do some exploration to find the explanation to everything they needed to know. How they got there, how to escape the Feywild, how to cure the siblings, and even the BBEG's weaknesses. But, like any other D&D adventure, one can never prepare for what the players will do. This is true, this is very true, and when you put together an adventure, there is any number of things the players can choose to do. But this does bring up an important point, and one that I myself even struggle with, which is railroading. Now, a lot of times you hear the term railroading, and that is seen as a bad thing, but there is good railroading, especially in a one-shot. With a one-shot, there is very much a pretty set beginning and end to your adventure, and a lot of the things happening in the middle have a pretty set path as well. So in that case, railroading is good. It's good to present a very clear path that follow this path, and you find the adventure. Now then, between that, that does not mean the players cannot make their own decisions. For example, with the bridge situation again, and they could have closed the gates to block off these siblings, or they could have fought the siblings, knocked them unconscious. There were a number of things they could have done, and they did choose a very good option to do so. So in this case, there is a clear set that they need to go down, while still having options as to how they proceed. Little tangent aside though, let's continue the story. The party managed to lock the gates, buying them some time until the siblings managed to find another way to get inside. From this point onward, Chunibaro was not cooperating with the party, showing her dissatisfaction towards the party. Muscles decided to keep an eye on Chunibaro while the rest of the party explored the temple. The party saw an ominous locked gate that led to the courtyard, but decided against opening it, in favor of exploring the rest of the temple first, since it was obvious the BBG would be waiting for them on the other side. Regardless, Chunibaro attempted to open against the party's wishes, and thus Muscles decided to manacle her and stay back to keep an eye on her. Next to them was a pit filled with quicksand, which will be relevant later on. Alright, so this is where things do start to go downhill. We have already been presented with party conflict. Now, what I'm confused about here, though, is earlier in the gate situation, they were able to, out of character, discuss it and come to a mutual resolution, or at least it seems like it was a mutual resolution. In this situation, however, they did not take time to discuss anything out of character. They simply allowed them to attempt to do this thing against the party, and then made a pretty aggressive action of restraining that player's character for the time, and now spreading the party to essentially keep them on lockdown. I personally don't agree with this tactic, as this has essentially locked two whole people out of continuing the adventure. This starts as a kind of a continued point of conflict later on, as we will see. I was not there, however, so perhaps things play out a little differently, but I just have what I'm reading here, and that is my take. So, continuing the post. It didn't take too much time until the party stumbled upon the library which the elf had mentioned. Most scrolls contained irrelevant information. The more valuable ones were locked behind a simple puzzle, although the party took some time to figuring it out, but eventually they managed to beat it, and got a hold of a scroll which mentioned a hidden portal within the courtyard. While this was happening, the siblings were going at the main gate, slowly causing it to break. But until that happened, the party had more time which they could have used to explore the rest of the temple or make a plan. Simultaneously, Chunibaro was getting frustrated because it was taking them, the party, too long, or something along those lines. And with that said, she somehow managed to escape from Muscle's grasp despite being manacled, and decided to cast the knock spell in order to unlock it. Knowing that the party wasn't anywhere near ready for the combat, and most of the temple remained unexplored, I asked, "Are you sure?" To which she said, "Yes." without checking with the rest of the party first. Now, I need to pause here. There was a couple things here that I feel is very problematic, both for the player's side and admittedly for the DM's side as well, and really for the table as a whole. Now, in this situation, it's very well established that the party does not want to initiate any of this fight or anything yet, and the rest of the party is trying very hard to work together, whereas this player is going to be very combative. Now, they are frustrated, but it's very well they could be frustrated because rather than trying to talk out a solution, they were literally chained down, which can definitely cause some frustration. Now, I'm not fully defending this person as they clearly made some bad decisions here and were very combative with the rest of the party, which led them to this point. And my only other issue I might point out is that at this point, it really seems like this was the time to kind of take a pause and attempt to discuss this again out of character to ensure that everyone was okay with the actions being taken place. Because it's very clear at this point that not everyone is on the same page. Again, I was not there, so perhaps I'm misreading how this went down, but I digress, and let's continue the post. What happened next can only be described as a mass chain collision in which I was merely an observer. Despite almost getting a TPK, I had little to do with it. Before moving on, I'd like to mention that the BBEG had an aura which caused creatures that failed the save against it to roll random mental states, such as rage, fear, tranquility, joy, etc. I admittedly have to disagree a bit there as well. Even if it got to that point, as the DM, there is kind of a role that you can play as mediator to kind of put a pause on things, to just let it play out. But again, this was a one-shot, so maybe this sort of chaos is just kind of what everyone was kind of looking to do. At which case, I guess I can't really tell you you're wrong or anything. But up to this point, I feel like there is a lot of issues at play at this table. And they're not all on the one person, I feel like, personally. But again, wasn't there, so let's continue. The gate was flung open by the spell. The BBEG rolled for initiative, the party rolled for initiative, the siblings rolled for initiative. It was a free-for-all from here on out. The BBEG approached Muscles and Chunibyo, causing its aura to envelop them. Muscles was afflicted with rage, causing her to attack the nearest creature each turn if she can. Chunibyo rolled fear, causing her to run away from other creatures. BBG caused its action to break the main gate, allowing the siblings to come inside. It was Muscle's turn next. She decided to use the throw Chunibyo at the siblings as a distraction or missile. I'm not quite sure, TBH. Whichever the case may be, she rolled poorly on the throw, causing Chunibyo to fall into the sand pit next to them. Keep in mind that Chunibyo still had her hands bound by the manacles, and the rest of the party was either too busy fighting against the multiple enemies that they didn't notice, or decide to ignore, that Chunibyo was quickly getting swallowed by the sand. For the rest of the one-shot, the Chunibyo was stuck in the pit. Honestly, props for not rage quitting though, and honestly, props as well. Like, despite how chaotic this is, we cannot ignore the fact that everyone's sticking through the session, so it's like, there's something here everyone's enjoying, right? So, absolute props to everyone for sticking with the chaos. You know, that's good. That's good on them. It's good sportsmanship. Well, I guess it's not sport, gamership. You get the point. Continuing post. Eventually, the rest of the party failed the saves against the aura, causing all sorts of scenarios. Karamari was afflicted with joy now the BBEG was his BFF, and everyone was so nice to him in his mind. So Meow was afflicted with tranquility. She was unable to feel threatened and thus decided to chill in the middle of a battle. Bob was lucky enough to keep his sanity. While the party was having an acid trip, combat was still raging on. The siblings were close enough to do some damage, but the party clumped together and disoriented. One of them decided that it would be a perfect opportunity to cast Cone of Cold, hitting everything in its path. Half the party went down, but luck was on Bob's side, and Muscles was bulky enough to tank most things. Bob tried to rescue some of the party members, but they kept going down. Eventually, most of those two were down, failed their death saves. Only Karamari passed the saves and was now laying unconscious on the floor. Bob used his last hearing word on Karamari so that they could escape, but Karamari ended up getting hit by another AoE spare before he could do anything, and with that, Bob decided to make a run for it while the rest were distracted. On the meantime, the free-for-all continued. The siblings were fighting BBEG, the BBEG was fighting Muscles, and Muscles were fighting against BBEG. It's not really a free-for-all. It seems a pretty clear everyone versus the BBEG to me, but whatever. Eventually, Muscles was able to break free from the aura's effects, and after noticing that she was the only one left in the party, she decided to retreat as well. A wise decision. Epilogue. For those wondering, Tim will contain everything the party needed to succeed against the boss. The key for the siblings, a description of the BBEG's aura, and even items which nullified the aura. In the end, there were 3 player deaths and 2 near deaths. Jimmy Bio survived the Cone of Cold, but eventually died from suffocating in the quicksand. She eventually stopped praying for other reasons. Sumia failed all his saving throws after getting hit by the Cone of Cold. Kamari succeeded on his saving throws again, but with no way to move, he was granted a coup de grace by the BBG at the end of the combat. Bob and Muscles barely made it out alive. They must have had 15 hit points at most between the two. Muscles' existence would be an omen for every other party that she joined. People claim she gives them bad luck in the roles and has been present in multiple Neo-TPKs. At the time, I was sure Chinny Bio was the one to blame. In hindsight, both her and Muscles did everything in their power in an attempt to get TPK'd, and I unknowingly aided and abetted them. Whether they were intentionally trying to sabotage each other, or this was simply the result of a bunch of questionable decisions, is up to you. All in all, this chaotic mess was the quest was going for, so in a way, was a success. And with that in mind, I would say success indeed. And again, you have to give big props to everyone involved at this. Despite all the chaos, everyone does still play through the one-shot. And even right here, our good DM friend does make note of the shortcomings of both them and the party. There's at no point during this is anyone really 100% at blame. There was definitely a bit of blame here and there, but at the end of the day, this really isn't the worst of D&D adventures ever. It is extremely chaotic, sure, but, well, as they pointed here at the end, it was meant to be a bit of a large-scale, chaotic, Feywild mess. So, for both the good and the bad, as long as everyone had a good time, I guess, you can still chalk it up as a success. But that's going to do it for our first story here. Thank you very much for the submission, and I hope everyone enjoyed a little bit of a more chaotic, lighthearted story to start us off with. My plans for the series is hopefully just find some fun stories like this one, and possibly some more uplifting ones as well, to kind of help bring people into the RPG space and continue my enjoyment of the game as well. I don't know a release cycle for these as of yet, but we're just going to play it by ear as we go. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.